Is this into the church mic? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. If you could have your seats wherever it's comfortable, and hopefully you can see. If you can't see, then maybe come up just a little bit closer. My name's Marcou, and I'm a member of the St. Sebastian's Buildings and Grounds Committee. I'm also a parish trustee, and my co-presenter today is Holly Rutenbeck. Holly is a longtime parishioner and is also a professional engineer, so we're very, very fortunate to have her skills as well as many of the other skills on the Buildings and Grounds Committee to help us through a lot of the tasks in front of us. So we've got a lot of material to cover. We'll do it as quickly as we can, and then we'll certainly be here to take any questions that you might have afterwards. Also, thank you to Patrick, who is simulcasting this, and it will be available for anyone who wants to see it on the internet after, of course, they've watched 8 o'clock Mass. So we will start with the aerial shot of St. Sebastian's. I'll keep my pointer over here in case we need it. First shot, we all saw the incredible amount of scaffolding that was on the bell tower. Well, that's not the first time we had scaffolding on the church. This is about 1929. The church was actually starting construction during the Great Depression. So if you think about the amount of faith that people had, 3 weeks after the stock market crash in 1929, St. Sebastian's broke ground on this magnificent church. Not knowing what the future would be, but with faith in God and faith in each other that this faith community could construct this beautiful place to worship. This is about 1930. The church is nearing completion. You can see here the bell tower in view. And of course, we only need to look not at the slide, but up in the church, and we can see some of the water damage that has occurred. And this has been cumulative water damage over the last probably about 15 to 18 years. To give you some proof of that, as a much younger Tom Marotic, Rocky Marcoux, Tom Tishoni, and Brian Kirkpatrick, this is 2005. We're on the roof looking for where is this water coming in. And of course, ultimately, we knew where the water was coming in. It was coming in through the stone, through the mortar joints, which were cracked and required tuck pointing. And the parish couldn't afford it. There were several stopgap measures that were done to try and stop some of the water, with various degrees of success. Ultimately, in 2019, the Buildings and Grounds Committee commissioned an engineering analysis with a drone analysis, and we were able to determine that nothing short of a tuck pointing of the complete tower would be really the only answer to solving all of the issues with the water. So the parish moved forward with that project. The scaffolding cost alone is $130,000. To wrap this building. And of course, the last time this building was wrapped was 1929 to 1930. It's 103 feet to the top of that scaffolding. And believe me, when you're at about 80 feet, it starts wearing on you. Holly and I have been up there many, many times along with members of the committee, and it's quite a trip. So let's talk about what is tuck pointing to begin with. Well, we have a masonry structure behind those plaster walls on the other side, and the whole church is masonry. There's 3 essential components to our masonry puzzle. One are these beautiful cut stone. These are capitals in this case. There's some ornamentation here. This was hand carved. And then you have solid stone. Those are all cut limestone. The field stone, or what we generally would refer to as Lannon stone, is also limestone. And that is the majority of the stonework on the tower and the church. And then in between are mortar joints. Now the mortar joints are where the problem generally lies. The mortar is, it basically binds all of the limestone together. That's how we have the structure holding up. Mortar is porous, limestone is porous. It all absorbs a certain amount of water, but generally that water then is given back to nature when the temperatures change or the wind comes. So that's a balance back and forth. However, mortar will move when the stones move, and when that mortar moves, then you have hairline cracks that can develop over time, over decades. And those hairline cracks, if not addressed, take on more moisture. When moisture gets into those stones and into the mortar joints, it expands when it freezes in winter, which increases the size of the cracks. So that's the situation we had for a long time on the church. We had a lot of movement. We had even more movement once we had the cracks coming in. Now, these are carved cut stones, so basically St. John, St. Luke, St. Mark, and Matthew. These are the four evangelists. Most people would never see these. These are towards the top of the tower, and they're beautiful. A little bit of weathering, but you'd expect that after 93 years of exposure to the weather. Overall, the cut stone on the building is in excellent condition, aside from, as I said, about 93 years of weathering. The Lannon stone's also in fairly good shape. Most of the cracking of any stone was on the Lannon stone. You can see various cracks here. You can see all of the various mortar joints that have failed. All of these joints between the cut stone and the Lannon stone have failed in many, many places. Here's my hand literally buried, fingers up to my wedding ring, in some of the cracks that were on that tower. So it's no wonder all that water was coming in. And of course, most of the water was not coming into the church. Most of the water was going into the rest of the masonry structure, doing more damage. So the tuck pointing operation basically cuts out all of the old mortar joints on the stone and the cut stone. Now, not every single joint. We did about 30% of the tower, but every joint was inspected to see if it required it. And if it required it, you would have basically on the bottom right picture you see, you would grind out to about 3/4 of an inch in depth and then place new mortar in there. And this is what it looks like when it's completed. And these are some of the stone capitals completed. It was a very thorough job. And then the entire tower was coated with a breathable sealant. So that sealant allows water, it repels water, but allows any water that may be trapped in the masonry to actually migrate out. Here's the metal roof of the church. This is circa 1960. In 1980, which was a major renovation time because the thrust was added, this was in tune with Vatican II standards, the metal roof, the original metal roof, for whatever reason was failing. The decision was made to put a 3-tab asphalt shingle roof on at the time. That's about a 20-year roof. It's a roof that you might have on your house. It was a stopgap. It did the trick for about 20 years. But when we did the Giving Faith the Room to Grow campaign in 1999 and 2000, we also had to tackle the roof because it was starting to give out. So that roof was removed. The metal roof underneath it was removed, and the new copper roof that we have today was added along with, so here you see the panels here, along with new gutters as well. And this is a good view of the copper roof. The roof itself is in magnificent shape. It should be. It's only 20 years old. We should be able to get about a 75-year to maybe 100-year lifespan out of a standing seam copper metal roof. But these two roofs were not done, which has led to some confusion. When people say we did the roofs on the bell tower, then people are saying, well, we thought we did that in 2000. We did not do that in 2000. We did the church proper. And so these roofs we'll talk about in just a couple slides. Notice, though, from this aerial, there's a parapet wall here. What that serves as is a big bucket for water to drop into, all right? And, of course, it's designed that way. It has an exit point, but it can be a real problem if that roof becomes damaged. This is just another view of the standing seam roof. These are the aerials that were added in 2004 to the metal roof at the church. There was an aerial already, this is for lightning protection, on the bell tower as well as on the school smokestack. Both of those structures have been hit by lightning in the past and subsequently have been hit by lightning since we had the lightning protection. But before the original installation of the lightning protection, what happened is, and you see on the left-hand side is the cross that we recently replaced. The middle picture is taken from about 1980 because you can see the 3-tab shingles stacked on the roof ready to go on. And then this is circa 1932. Note how high the cross is and how long this shaft is on both of these earlier pictures. Note there is no shaft on this picture. The lightning took out that shaft. And that was, I haven't been able to accurately date that yet, but it's probably sometimes in the late 80s or early 90s. So lightning protection is very important, and it was a very good investment when the parish did that back in 2001. For the purposes of today's discussion, we've divided the tower into really 3 sections. The lower vault is not in this picture. It's basically where we're sitting today. You reach it through the doors. There's a stairway that goes up, and it's largely storage. The middle vault and the upper vault are part of the same open space, but we're going to delineate that for purposes of the discussion. The hatched line is the parapet wall around that pale that I discussed earlier. We call that the AB roof area, and then there's the actual turret and cupola. How do you get there? Well, you go through those doors, you climb up a staircase, then you climb up a ladder, and you get to the top of this, which you used to have to manually push over, until we added this, which is pneumatically controlled back in 2001. And you get up on the roof with Tom Tashoni, okay? He's like a fixture. He's been part of buildings and grounds so long, he's almost in every picture. He's standing on the saddle. This portion of the roof right here is a portion that was not replaced in 2000. It had been replaced earlier. This is not original to the church. Basically, the water from the church roof, the new roof, flows into here, and then there are drainage systems that take it away once it gets inside the bell tower. So once again, an opportunity for water, if not directed correctly, to get into the masonry. Upper vault is here. This is a concrete and steel lateral cross bracing that's at the top of the upper vault. And then this is a very precarious situation, which we corrected now during the restoration project. How do you get from the middle vault to the upper vault? You climb a ladder. And this is a very dangerous ladder. It's very long, and it's got steel rungs, and if you lose one rung, goodbye. And so this is Bob Duffy, actually. This is about circa 2005. We could no longer put our employees at risk, and for that matter, our volunteers and our contractors, some of whom would refuse to go up to service based on this is not an OSHA compliance. So the solution to that was we took basically a lesson from the scaffolding. We were going to originally rent scaffolding to take a look at what was going on with that upper bracing. We did that, and we said, why don't we just keep it? So we bought this scaffolding, and we now essentially have a stairway, very safe and OSHA compliant, all the way up to the upper vault. At the top of the upper vault, what you couldn't see from below, is significant delamination of the concrete which lies above the steel beams. Now that's an issue we're still looking at. We have an engineering analysis that's pending, and then once we get that engineering analysis back, we'll know what the remediation is for that. You can see the cracking is severe on the top, but that's a top layer. There are steel beams that this is encased by that concrete. All right, from the platform, you take another ladder, but it's a small one this time. And then you go into and open these two copper-clad wood doors, and you're inside of the bell tower cupola itself, which is it's an extraordinary place. It's actually a octagon, so it's an 8-sided figure. These are our bells, okay? They're loudspeakers. They always have been. We never had bells here. But they do a very close approximation of a bell. Inside these windows, there's BA, so they're basically two types of windows. If you look at the hexagon aerially or from the outside, this is taken from the scaffolding, these are the top of what we call the A. The A has basically an A-shaped top with a cross on top of it, and the B is kind of our bucket. That's where all the water from the A roof is directed to the B roof, and then that has to, both of these drain into the inside of the cupola, go onto the floor of the cupola, and then through a drain. So another pinch point in the system. So this hatched line is about the location of where that AB roof is. This roof, and to be quite honest, when we were taking on the project of the tuck pointing, it wasn't the intention to replace those two roofs, the cupola roof as well as the roof that we call the AB parapet roof. But when we got up there, what the drones didn't tell us once we got up there was the terrible condition both of these roofs are in. And because we had invested the money in the scaffolding, it made no sense not to do those roofs while we were up there. Of course, on further investigation, it's actually a good thing that we did, because once we took them apart, we found some interesting things. Before we get to those slides, these are vents that are inside the cupola. They take air from the cupola, and then they exhaust that air through crosses that are on the A roofs. There are 4 of those. So there's 4 A roofs and there's 4 B roofs. The B roof, the vent is hidden, so they just use a standard vent. Incredible craftsmanship that was involved here. This is the wood structure and some of the masonry after we peeled back the AB roof layers, just in terrible condition. That had to be repaired, and you can see the condition of the substrate. Totally rotted. So if we hadn't done it, we would have still been taking on a lot of water. So ultimately, we replaced all of the structure on this. So this is a series of 2x6s, 2x4s that are used for joists. Those were pressure treated, and then we used pressure treated plywood, and then a waterproof membrane, which is called ice and water shield, was attached, and then lead-coated copper. So the reason that roof doesn't shine like copper shines, it shines more silver, is because there's a lead coating on that. The lead coating is done to further protect the copper. So it adds a little bit of longevity to it. The original roof was also lead-coated copper, as was the roof on the cupola itself. So all of this is the AB roofs. Now we're at the last stop of the tower, at least, in the turret cupola. Get to the top, another disaster. Well, once again, this original to the church, most of it. Some of it had been replaced at one point, probably during that lightning strike, but the majority of this was original, as was the AB roof. It was in terrible shape. Here's Chris Bowl, who's the vice chair of the committee, and of course our leader, Holly, Brian Kirkpatrick, our director of maintenance, and then myself, prior to the stripping of the old roof. The cross itself, you can see there's an aerial that's actually hanging. That's what this piece is right here. That should be upright. That's the lightning protection. And the cross, as well as the roof, the guttering system, everything was shot. So we replaced that, putting in new lead-coated copper, and then we had to find a panel, a freeze panel, and there's Father Peter Patrick, who was up on the scaffolding many times. And not too many pastors, I think, are going to go 103 feet. And he wasn't just trying to get closer to God, okay? Although he said we said a couple of prayers while we were up there, too. But, I mean, this is a person that's committed to this parish. And so he was up there doing inspections. Also, we did a blessing of the cross at one point. These cupola fascia panels, you can see from the street, but you can't see that well in terms of it not being an exact replica of what we took off. If we wanted an exact replica, it would have cost a lot of money just to simply make those panels. So Buildings and Grounds chose this, and I believe I think the final vote went to Tom Tashoni, okay, with a good artistic eye, okay, saying that probably closely was the closest approximation. So that's what we went forward with. And then, of course, the cross. Cross was beautiful. This picture was taken right here in the sanctuary. A craftsperson by the name of Mr. Lipinski from Langer Roofing was the person who did this. And this is old school. I mean, it's incredible. There's obviously Father Peter Patrick and Deacon Jim. The original cross to the church, here's the new cross. You almost can't tell the difference. So it's just an incredible amount of craftsmanship. The cross, this is before dawn. Earlier in the summer, I was up here watching the cross being moved from 55th Street and then placed in a protective crate to be brought to the top. We now have a wire that goes through the middle of the cross to an aerial on the top. So we don't see the lightning protection from the outside anymore, except for that little antenna and you can't see it from the street. This is taken with the scaffolding still up. This is my favorite picture. This one I took from the scaffold, the very top of the scaffolding, but you can see it. You can see the community that we serve and beyond in the picture. This is taken from a drone shot that Langer recently provided, so you can see it free of the scaffolding. It's quite beautiful. And you also see in the next shot the AB roofs, and they're kind of shining as well. And you can see once again, they're a bucket. And those have scuppers that actually drain into here, and then there's a floor drain. So all of that was repaired and replaced as well. And if you look at the bell tower now, you can see how beautiful it is because it was cleaned and tuck pointed. So this is just, a really complete job, a very thorough job. And then Father Peter Patrick, in a beautiful ceremony to light the bell tower, you may recall to stop the auction item to light the bell tower. We needed a little bit more help money-wise, but that was provided by this budget as well. And Father Peter Patrick lit the tower, and it's just gorgeous. We did not light the cross. The cross stands in shadow. One of the reasons is we couldn't put lights up there that we could access safely in the future. These lights we can access from the interior of the cupola. But if you look at that cross at night, you can see the cross in a shadow that's created. And I think that's a very interesting effect. Also, you'll note that the cross is copper with no lead coating. We did that specifically because we wanted that cross to have a different color than the roof below it. It will eventually match the same color of the church roof, but because it's above that lead-coated copper, it will always have a distinction. And the importance of the cross to all of us and to our faith once again is reinforced for decades to come. There's the outside of the church. Beautiful. Frank Miller took this picture. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague and our leader, and I want to thank Holly publicly. A lot of people stepped up on this project in a big way. Certainly Joanne in the business office, Joanne Perlberg, Carol Poth, Father Peter Patrick, Brian Kirkpatrick really stepped up big time. He was here, I was here almost every day during the construction, and he was doing incredible number of things to assist the contractors. But Holly held everything together with the contracts. She was the contract administration, and she did a magnificent job. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to be talking about the St. Sebastian window and the north wall to start with. Holly?
Hi, everybody. So as Rocky said, I'm Holly Rutenbeck. I'm the chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee. I'm just going to touch base real quick on the work that was done at the same time as the work on the bell tower by the same contractors. So a lot of you may have noticed when you were sitting, here in the church every week that we had all of this water staining that was on either side of the St. Sebastian window. We had all that work done on the St. Sebastian window. It's beautiful, and now we have this water staining on either side. Tom Tiscioni actually did some touch-up painting for us before last Christmas to cover it up, but it didn't stop the water from coming in, and even now we can see some of the water staining that had come through in the last year while we were having that tuck pointed. So what we have here is a picture of the steel lintel that's above the window. The window does not actually support any of the weight of the roof above it. So we have a steel lintel above the window that had been having just years of water infiltration, again, mainly because of all of those mortar joints allowing water into the wall. And I got a thumbs up from my daughter here. Thank you. So the steel lintel is actually heavily rusted. They removed all of the stone that actually had rust jacking. It was partially sticking out from the walls of the church, which you'll actually notice on the windows that we haven't done yet. If you look closely, you can see that rust jacking from the outside on all the other windows as well. So this is the first one that we addressed. We performed some steel testing on that steel lintel, and once we did that, we found that there was some fairly, important, or it wasn't super significant, but there was important section loss that needed to be addressed. So some additional steel was added to that steel lintel. Grafe designed that repair for us. We had the steel welded on. The old steel below it was all sandblasted and painted with zinc-rich primer. And this is a photo of the adhesive applied to the stainless steel flashing that would allow, if any water gets into that wall in the future, that stainless steel flashing is going to direct the water out of the wall before it would ever reach the window in the future. And this is just another photo of some of the stainless steel flashing that we had adhered to that original I-beam. We had then waterproofing added to the top of it because we had the zinc-rich primer. We're never going to want to come back to this again, so we had the waterproofing applied as well to make sure that we really did not have any future infiltration onto that steel beam. And then we had all of the new, we had all the lantern stone that was saved from the removal reinstalled back over the top of that beam, so you can't actually tell that we had done any work now. And at the same time, we had some weep holes that were installed that have teeny tiny little mesh covers on them to make sure that we don't have any material come, in or out of those, but it allows all the water to wick out of the wall if we get anything in the future. And this is a photo of the finished wall. As you can tell, you actually can't see that we did anything now. All of the tuck pointing, 100% of the tuck pointing above that steel lintel was all removed and replaced during this project. Overall, I would say on the bell tower, we had about 70% of the mortar joints ended up getting replacement or repairs. And on the north wall, we had 100% above the window, and I believe about 60% from that point below it. So it was a very significant project. So then the coping stones, one of the original details at the top of this north wall, if you actually look up there, we have all of these coping stones. They are massive stones. They're maybe about 15 feet in length. There are joints between each one of the pieces. You can kind of see the joints here. And all of those were also broken down. It was just caulk sealant. So those needed to be either, all of the stones would have to be replaced and have through flashing put in, or found a different alternative where we removed all of that existing mortar and all of the sealant. Then we placed back rod into the joint. Then we applied sealant into the joint, over the back rod material, onto the adjacent stones. And then we actually had a lead T-cap installed. This actually reduced a lot of our risk. If we would have done the steel flashing and removed those stones, there was a good chance that we could have broken them in the process, and that would have been more detrimental. So this is actually addressing the exact issue that we would have been, trying to take care of with that steel flashing by just doing something that was far less invasive. And that's the final product of the coping stones, and you can kind of see the 100% removal at that point of that north wall. And then at the same time, Brian got up there, since the scaffolding was up there, he did thorough cleaning of the St. Sebastian window from the outside, and then he also repaired any small cracks inside the wood that had already appeared and did some touch-up painting. And then we removed all of the north wall scaffolding. Rocky had actually found, while the scaffolding was up there, that this downspout was ruptured on the north wall, so we had that replaced at the same time with copper. Now, this was not part of the entire tuck pointing project, but during the 2019 facade inspection, we had found that the precast panels, there was 2 locations where the precast panels on the school had actually shifted outwardly from the school by about 3/4 of an inch. We were not able to determine exactly what the cause of the shifting was by just putting a camera in there, so we actually had to go from the inside of the school, remove the bookshelves and radiators from in front of the windows there, and expose the back part of those precast panels, which would actually allow us access to the panel connections to the school. So once we had removed that, here's a photo of the 2 connections on either side here, and you can see right here specifically that we have not really any concrete holding that connection to the school. So that's why it had shifted outwardly. We did not have good connection anymore. And again, just another photo showing the deterioration of those connection angles and why it was important that we would undertake these repairs. So we actually had a design back when we had repaired a similar issue at room 202, which is over the tot lot last Christmas. We used a similar design where we actually had new painted steel and stainless steel anchors put in place to hold that precast panel onto the school. So this is one location that was not identified during our 2019 facade report, but this actually shows the type of gap that we were seeing, and it was not noted in the 2019 facade report. We actually saw this when we were on the scaffolding for the north wall. So for now, we had some crack gauges installed to monitor if there's any active movement on this one. Grafe was able to put a camera into this precast panel and found that once you get about 2 to 3 feet in, that it is flush with the face of the school. So we're going to continue monitoring this one, and in the future we may need to undertake repairs similar to the other 2 rooms, but for right now we're just going to keep an eye on it. And then one of the other projects that was actually run by the playground committee and was funded separately, the precast panels were funded by anonymous donors, which I want to give a shout out to them because they felt it was incredibly important to make sure that the school garden was open during COVID for kids to use at the school for library time. The playground committee actually did all the fundraising and secured grants for the new playground structures, buildings and grounds. Really, we provided a little bit of guidance on it, but it's just a really exciting project that so many people have been involved with. So here's one of the photos of a new piece of equipment that just opened up last week before the Catholic Schools Walk. And this was the equipment that was installed a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, in our beautiful church with all the scaffolding down.
So, thank you. The total cost for doing the bell tower restoration to date, approximately $650,000 right now. And I say right now because there are three components left that we need to pay for. One is Holly has been soliciting bids to repair the plaster at these two locations and potentially on the St. Sebastian window. And we're hopeful that we can move ahead with that. So once again, we're getting a couple of bids right now. We also need to have a solution for the unsafe ladder that is here that goes from the lower vault to the middle vault. And we have a solution for that. We're just waiting on the pricing for it. And then also that lateral cross beam that we showed earlier that has the spalling concrete. We're not sure what that is going to cost. We won't know that until we get the engineering analysis. How did we as parishioners pay for all of the work to date? About a little over $120,000 was taken from the building fund balance that we had at the time. A portion was taken from reserves. And right now we've borrowed about $250,000 from the St. Sebastian School Foundation. Now we have authority to borrow up to $400,000, but to date we've only needed the $250,000. If we have to do these other three items, or I shouldn't say if, at the point we execute on the other three items, we would likely draw down some additional loan money. Many of you are donors to the foundation. I want to assure you that the foundation is not paying for the work. They are providing the parish with a very low interest loan. That interest rate is lower than what the parish could have gotten on the market for a loan. So we save money there. But it is also more money that the foundation is making on the loan it's giving to us than the very conservative portion of the portfolio. So some of the portfolio for the foundation is held in some very secure, well, all of it's in secure assets, but some of it's very secure and lower performing, though, because of the security. We're making more money for the foundation by paying back our interest at basically 2%. So it's a win for the foundation. It is a win for the parish. And we've done this in the past as well, probably not to that level, but we're a good credit risk. As long as we continue to do and be the stewards that we have been, and everyone has just been magnificent, as is evidenced by the fact that during COVID, for as incredibly disruptive that has been to the world, to our individual lives, to the life of the parish, everyone has continued to contribute at the same level that we had pre-COVID. So it's an amazing story for our parish in terms of stewardship. And it's our time, right? It's our time to shine now, and we're coming through with that. But what we need to do next, there's a lot of work ahead. We know the cost that was incurred with the stained glass window when that was done. We need to do the west wall, similar to the rebuild on the north wall. This time we have to add the stained glass window. It would make no sense to not do both of them together because we're going to have to scaffold for that. We have to scaffold as well to do the east window, and then there is the south window above the choir loft, and of course all the other windows. Some of these are going to have to be complete rebuilds, as the St. Sebastian window was. Some of them we can save some of the tracery. The tracery is the wooden elements of the windows. So you have the stained glass and then you have the wood. The wood's called the tracery. We can salvage some of that, I think, but it will depend on how quickly we get to it. Also, the church, the last time the church was painted was 1980, at the time that they did the roof. And the church really could use a paint job. In the school, we have the precast panels that we have to take care of. As Holly noted, we've been acting responsibly as the need arose, and it was demonstrated, but ultimately every one of those panels is going to have to be addressed. And so it would be more cost-effective to do that all at once. So, and there's a big list of things, but ultimately what we'd like to do later this year and early in 2022 is Buildings and Grounds will convene listening sessions, very similar to what the parish did in 1998 and 1999 as a preface to the Giving Faith the Room to Grow campaign, where we redid a lot of the interior of the church. We added the gathering space, we added the elevators, we added a lot of improvements in the school, we put the new roof on, we air conditioned the church. A lot of those things, some parishioners were not some parishioners have arrived since those improvements were done and probably don't realize the scope of that. So we're going to do a presentation on the history of what has happened and what the investments have been by our parish over time. But then more importantly, we're going to listen to what the needs are, certainly some we've identified already, but other needs and other visions that people may have as parishioners, as users of our facilities, for all of the facilities, the school, the church hall, everything included, over the next 20 years. And then we will discern from that what the next steps would be in terms of where we would invest money next, what the priority order of those things would be, and what the will of the parish is to move forward with an aggressive or a conservative plan in terms of how we would implement that. So that's basically the road ahead in the near future over the next 6 months or so. We're hoping to have at the end of that time period a plan that at least places us strategically in a position to say, here's what needs to be done for the next 20 years to serve the needs physically of the buildings and the parishioners who use those buildings. So now you've been very patient and very attentive, and thank you for that. And yes, it has gone longer than 30 minutes, so sorry about that. But we kind of get into it. We're very both passionate about what we do. And it's never happened before, that's right, but there's a first for everything. But we would certainly want to take any questions that you have this morning about the work to date, or for that matter, even work in the future. So any questions? Well, thank you, Dan, and we're all visionary, right? Because ultimately, we have some of the talents on buildings and grounds, and we have a very talented committee. We only have a portion of it here. But all of you are visionaries, all of you by believing in what we do here and by funding the mission. So thanks to everyone in the parish, and thank you for those comments as well, Dan. Other questions, concerns? Right, before we let you go, one late-breaking item. You may have noticed that the elevator is out of service. And we had a pressure test done on the elevator, which is a new requirement by the city to ensure that you don't have catastrophic failure at some point. And shortly after the pressure test, we had catastrophic failure. And for the folks at home and those in the audience, that doesn't mean the elevator dropped, okay? It is a hydraulic elevator, which works on a piston, and then oil is put in under pressure. So our elevator would never just simply drop. It would just gradually go down, which is what happened, and we need to repair that. It's we originally envisioned 4 stories for the 2 stories above the gathering space for a potential school addition when we did the Giving Faith the Room to Grow campaign. So we put the foundations in to support that. We also made sure that elevator at the time was a 4-stop elevator. So it's church hall, gathering space, and then 2 potential floors to be added later. So it's a 40-foot piston. We're not going to replace it with a 40-foot piston. We're going to replace it with basically a 20-foot piston. If in the future the parish does decide to add those 2 stories, we would simply have to swap out the piston. That's not likely to do that addition, so we'll save the money now, and if we need to, we can always pay for it later. We don't have an exact price, but it's about approximately $35,000, and it's about a 12-week lead time. So that's not been good news for the play this weekend, certainly not good news for the Christian Women Boutique, but we're asking folks, and even folks that use the facility for other purposes in the church hall, to use the 55th Street entrance because it has the least number of steps as opposed to coming in through the gathering space and then coming down that way. So not something that could have been foreseen, but we will attempt to get it repaired as soon as possible. We have a finance committee meeting on Wednesday, and that will be an issue that will be taken up by finance committee, and that's a very immediate need, but you won't see it until then. So thank you for coming this morning, and we hope we gave you a little bit of glimpse of what was going on behind all of that scaffolding that was up there. And for those of us that were privileged to be able to get up there to actually see those views, we thought it was important to preserve those views for all of you so that you could see it, and for the history of the parish so that folks in the future can see what we did in our time when it was our time to be stewards of these buildings. So thank you again, and I hope you have a blessed and productive Sunday.